be subject to the approval of the township solicitor.
Second.
Okay. Would you like to explain that further?
Yeah, I could do a couple different things if I could with that.
Yep.
And just a couple of things to make sure that we're extra careful with this is, the first thing is you'll remember that we met in executive session at the end of the last meeting. We called an executive session, and the reason for that was that just that very day we made some real progress in moving towards the proposed settlement in this matter. After speaking with the board and getting their feelings during the executive session, I was able to talk to the council on the other side, and we're actually at a point now where we're trading settlement agreements and releases. We have agreed in principle upon the number, and we're trying to get that finalized now. So I believe that tonight would be an appropriate time for you all to vote on this and that we can disclose the number at this point in time. One of the things, I guess, maybe out of an abundance of caution, since this wasn't on the agenda, maybe we should have a motion as well. Just let this motion pen for a second and have a motion to put this on the agenda.
Speak.
And then the second thing would be to let anybody who wants to speak on this motion and from the public to get up and speak. So
I agree.
if we could do that.
Well, I'll, if I'm allowed to do this, table my own motion pending proceeding the way you've described, Mr. Byrne.
That's right. That's good.
Okay, so
Anybody
we
second?
have to call a vote on
We're
the
gonna
table?
first we're going to table. Yeah, call vote on the table. And then,
All right.
Second.
All those in favor of tabling?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Anyone opposed? None opposed? Okay.
Mr. President, I would move that
Holmes?
we add to our agenda this evening the consideration of a motion to approve our township manager to enter into a full and final settlement with the parties in the Delaware County Court of Common Pleas condemnation proceedings that we have been a party to.
Second. Okay, second that. We did that by
Right,
voice
yeah,
vote?
yeah, yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone against the motion? Okay. Motion carries.
Okay. And then
Right.
now we got to move it from the table to the other.
Okay.
Well, no. Should we first ask members of the public if anyone has any comment to make on this?
You got to make the motion, right? first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'd have to get it back off the table so that we
Put it
can
on
then
the
talk about
agenda,
it. Yeah.
and
put
then
it
they
put
can
it on the
comment.
agenda.
Okay. So let's take it off the table.
Put it on the
Okay.
agenda.
Well, now it's on the agenda. What I've asked this room to do now is to approve the motion, which I don't think we should do until the public has had a
No,
chance.
I agree
now
with you
that
about
it
that.
knows.
I agree with you about that. Yeah.
But read
Okay,
the
so now
motion.
it's, I hear what you're saying. But I think
Now on the
maybe I
agenda,
make, yeah.
and people
comment
have
before we
heard
make
what
our
it's
motion.
about, so
Yes,
I would
you're
now
right.
invite the public, if anyone has
Okay.
any comment to make on that, they should do that before I reintroduce the actual consideration of the motion.
agree with you.
Okay.
Okay.
Bite the public.
All right, come on, Carrie.
Thank you. And Mr. Byrne, thanks for keeping it on the agenda so people do have an opportunity to speak. I think it's important that people understand what this settlement entails. People have been waiting to get it to a conclusion, which is great. There is a financial consideration. I'm not sure that people understood how much it was going to cost to acquire the property. I think that it also points out how expensive it can be to use eminent domain to acquire property. It would be nice if we could find out for public information approximately how much of the soft costs that were entailed in this entire endeavor, including legal fees, filing fees, other things, as an order of magnitude. It would be nice for the public to know how much did this cost us. And of course, it begs the question, how much are we getting in return? So I know that you've mentioned several terms of the lease for the Y, and that we own the building after 20 years, but I'm not sure that it was, in hindsight, a wise enough decision, and I think that that should be something the public should talk about. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Commissioner?
Mr. President, thank you. Before I renew the motion, if I could just make just one or two comments in response to Mr. Bogosian. Thank you, Gary, for your comments. I do not know right now what the full soft costs associated or what the costs of the appeal or the original proceedings were, I can tell you that they were cheaper for the efforts of people in this township who did that work for free, including to my left, my colleague Dan Siegel, who certainly assisted Mr. Burns' office in a number of the pleadings and the work that was done in that case. So I would like to note, I would like to thank him for his efforts, and also note that that is, among the other things he does for the township, was provided for free. And certainly Mr. Byrne put probably a lot more effort into this matter than actually made its way onto his timesheets. So I commend the work that he and his colleagues did as well. It's not an unreasonable request that you're asking for, and we can at some point compile as best we can a description of that. People will debate for a long time as to whether or not this was a positive thing or a negative thing. I think it's been pretty obvious since the late fall when the YMCA opened that it's been a very successful endeavor, and I think people are very positive about it. And the fact that even on Super Bowl Sunday it was hard to find a parking space in there, I think gives some indication of how popular it is now among our residents. And I am very glad to put to bed this lingering litigation issue that was hanging over our heads for so long. And certainly I am pleased with the final result. And I think any odds makers looking at this knew that there was greater risks ahead of us in litigation. So I commend our solicitor, and I encourage now my colleagues to support my motion, which I'd like to remove from the table and put back before everybody, to authorize Mr. Gentili to enter into a full and final settlement in the Delaware County Court of Common Pleas condemnation proceedings for the number $2,999,999, contingent upon the approval and review by Mr. Byrne of an appropriate settlement agreement and release.
Second.
Okay, Mario, before we vote on that, though, it was nice what Larry said and all, but that wasn't the answer that Gary was looking for. Larry, will you have an answer for Mr. Bogosian by the next meeting?
Yeah, we will, by the March Board of Commissioners meeting,
Yeah.
we can come as close as we possibly can for the
Okay.
costs associated with that, so.
Okay.
The other thing is, I think it's important, it's not an additional $3 million, it's a total
Well,
of
that-
2,999, whatever.
Well, the 3 million is not the total, that's what
I know.
Gary stated.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, you know, for the public to know that this isn't on top of the
Yeah,
There
correct.
was 1.2
1.5 or whatever
yeah.
that we already put out.
Right.
These-
This is, this is
yeah.
Included. in
included, that's included in this number too.
The total price.
Right. Right.
Can you just, I'm not sure that the audience can you just go through that and make sure they're clear? Because we're kind
Right.
of talking amongst ourselves, and I think
The
it's important.
2.999 million is the total. What we've given them already, and
Right.
so we're going to give them an additional
1.7 and change.
Right.
they're going to get. That does not include our legal fees, which we're going to find out for the next meeting.
Correct.
Thank you.
Please call a roll.
Mr. D'Amelio,
No.
Mrs. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Siegel,
Yes.
Mr. Holmes,
Yes.
Mr. McGarity,
No,
Mr. Connell,
Yes.
Mr. Wexler,
Yes.
Mr. Heilman,
Yes.
and Mr. Oliva.
Yes. All right. That concludes our new business. Let's start with other business. Commissioner D'Amelio.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm hosting another First Ward meeting this Wednesday evening at 7 p.m., depending, of course, if there's a storm, but all indications are that the storm will not begin till around between 6 and 8, so hopefully we can get it in, and that's what we're going to try to do. The First Ward, as many other wards in the township, in fact, in the county and other counties, experienced power outages again with a lot of frustration of days of residents without power. I know there's several issues that, PECO does have to deal with safety issues first before they go out, and I think some of the residents need to understand that, because when there's an ice storm of that magnitude, they have to ensure that their employees are safe as well before they go out and deal with the power outages. My concern, as is always, it's been since I became a commissioner, is whether or not they have enough employees to handle the storms of this magnitude, because it seems that every time there is a storm of this magnitude, I hear, well, this was a storm of the century. But we had several of them in the last 10 years. And everyone was told that the power is going to be up on Sunday. It didn't matter what county you were in, it's going to come up Sunday. The other problem is that when they have to recruit from other electric companies, from whether they're from Canada or from the South or whatever, it takes them at least a couple of days to get acclimated to the area and to where they need to be. And I believe from what I heard today on the news was that, I don't know if it's Delaware County is looking into whether or not they're handling this appropriately. In other words, when these trucks arrive and the men or women arrive to assist us, are they being handled the way they should be? Do they know where they're going, or what's the system like? And I don't know the entire plan that the county has, whether it's this or Montgomery County. I'm not sure because I didn't hear all of it, but I intend to look into it and find out exactly what was going on. I don't know, Dan, you've had issues in the past. I don't know how you felt this time. I don't know how many of us had similar issues, but again, I understand that there's a safety issue involved, at least in the beginning. So I think there are two things. One, a safety issue. The other one is whether or not these trucks coming in know exactly what they're doing and where to go. So I think that may delay it, it may not. I may be totally off, but somehow if we could find that out, that would be great. Some people, as in the past, and I saw this on the news as well, were told, when they called it in to PICO, that line, they were told, you're up. And they weren't up. So they would call the line again and say, no, we don't have power. Yet they were cleared as if they had power. I think there's no doubt that PICO has made a lot of improvements from the last storm than when we had that press conference and there were issues. But I don't know if we're there yet, because some of the other ideas or thoughts that I had was, you can't control every tree that's coming down. There's no doubt about it in a storm of that magnitude. You just can't. You can't predict it. But in areas where there's consistently power outages, whether it's a winter storm or a summer storm, for example, in Windsor Park, you may want to bury that line, because I don't know what they're doing during, when there are no storms. What are these line people doing then? And I don't know what the cost is associated, but if you bury some of these lines where you consistently have power outages, you know that it's going to happen because there's a significant amount of trees in that area. You may want to bury the line. Now, again, I fully understand you can't predict everything, but there are certain areas that just go out continually in every storm. That's just my thought on that. I don't know if we could look into it and get some, maybe, I didn't want to contact PICO, so maybe Larry can.
Yeah, I think the most appropriate thing to do is, first of all, PICO is still handling this emergency, and they're going to continue for the next week or so. So will I reach out to PICO and ask them for some reports? Yes.
No, I wouldn't do it now either, because with the possible storm Wednesday, I'm sure they're going to have their hands full again. So
You're not going to get anything from them right now.
I understand.
To be honest with you,
I
quite
understand.
frankly. And I know that the Public Utility Commission is also in the process of reviewing it, which is a normal process. Any time of a storm of this magnitude, the Utility Commission will come in and do a review. They'll contact the township. They'll contact the police department, all through public safety. So I think you won't see anything for probably another 2 or 3 months.
do you know which county it was? Because I didn't hear the whole
Montgomery
report.
County.
Are they looking into it?
Yeah, Montgomery County has some questions, I know. But Delaware County didn't come to a fraction of what.
Well, they got hit very hard. So did Chester County. It was very bad as well.
We still have 18 residents who's still without electricity
we do?
in Haverford Township. So
Okay.
we're not completely out of the woods just yet.
I got to tell you, is in every storm, our staff does a magnificent job in handling the storm and the magnitude of the problems that we have. And the firefighters, the police are always out there during these storms. And, it's really a safety issue. And it's a safety issue with PICO, and I fully understand that. So I think sometimes the residents have to think, I know there's an ice storm here without power, but in the beginning, at least, give them a chance to make sure that their employees are safe before they go out. But having said that, after that, some of these other issues about, the power being up or they're not knowing that, that they're out when they reported it, still needs to improve in some fashion anyway. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Hall.
I'm not going to beat that horse too much harder, but what I'd like to say is, Larry Gentile, I'd like to thank you enormously for your updates, your emails, your constant support of the Board of Commissioners so that we could relay messages to the residents. I thought it was outstanding. I know Public Works worked tirelessly. I will tell you that there were 14 utility men on my street from New Hampshire in the middle of the night working, trying to get electricity to everybody. This was just, I grew up in Maine. I know what it's like to have these terrible storms. And I think all of us really have to be sensitive to the fact that this was really, really terrible. And that people came from all over to help us, and they worked all night long. And I had some constituents, some residents that just got their electricity back yesterday. And it's just one of those things. Of course, everybody's going to review the plan and try to do better, but we always try to do better. But Mother Nature, she does her thing. So we just have to roll with it. And I think that we should also feel so fortunate that we have such a great township that came through in so many ways, and that we're fortunate enough to have electricity. I know it sounds crazy, but we all get so spoiled by this, and then we have some time without it, and we realize how fortunate we are. Lastly, I'd like to say that I think the communication that everybody put out was really well done, and that if we could even do better with that and be a little more cohesive in the future, which I know we're all working on, that would be great. Because Dan we know he does our outstanding newsletter that we love, and we all try to do something like that. But if we could come together, particularly in emergency situations, and try to streamline that a bit, that would be great. But other than that, I would just like to thank you, Larry, and your whole team. Tell you how much we appreciate it.
Great. Commissioner Siegel?
Thank you. Two things. One is to remind people that who live in the Paddock Farms area that the Paddock Farms Civic Association is in need of volunteers. They have been a vital part of the area for many years with their everything from July 4th to Easter to Oktoberfest, but they need volunteers to continue their efforts. It's like everything else we do. We need volunteers. They're the lifeblood of our community. If you are interested in helping the Paddock Farm Civic Association, you can contact me and I will get the information to them. They have an email of paddockfarms@gmail.com. Excuse me. And I urge people to continue to work with them, to volunteer, so that they can continue to do a lot of good for the community. They do wonderful things. Their July 4th parade is terrific, but they do a lot of other activities, and they really need volunteers, or they're concerned that they may not continue. With regard to the storm, the horse has been beaten a little. I just want to comment that I probably fielded about 150 email from residents, many of whom didn't have power. This is a difficult situation because no business staffs for the worst case scenario, and it's difficult. I've had communication issues over the years with PICO. I think the township, or at least what I received from Mr. Gentile, was better than in some years, and granted you needed power, but PICO's website actually had more information and more detailed information down to the number of homes that were out on an hourly basis in every township. So they have improved from a few years ago when there was no information on their website other than there's a storm. Are they perfect? No. I'm sure they can, and they are striving to do better. But I was pleased that I could look at any given time and see the exact numbers of residents in this township or anywhere else who were out. So it's a difficult situation because this was based on the number of homes out. The second worst storm they said they've encountered. And on Saturday morning, I drove down 252 from King of Prussia to Westchester Pike. And the devastation along that road was incredible. You just looked around, and I drove slowly, and everywhere you looked, there were trees down, wires down. It was as though I just spoke Commissioner Holmes, it was like a hurricane or a tornado had gone through there, and the storm didn't seem that bad. But obviously it was, and in some ways I was happy that I was out of town for part of it. But I do want to also say that there were a vast number of emails complimenting the township on everything from their efforts to clear roads. Our snow removal is terrific. Just drive into Lower Merion or other communities, and you will see the difference. One resident commented to me that he had to take his daughter. She worked in a medical facility where there were staffing shortages, and he knew that when he drove from his house on Harriet Lane, that he was going to be able to get there because those roads were clear. And that's a testament to the staff. They work hard. It's not easy, but they really do a terrific job of keeping the roads clear, and this year has been a tough year. So commendation to the staff, the police, everyone has worked together extremely well. During the first part of the storm, I saw the EMS people constantly going down Eagle Road. It's been a difficult period, and we've all, we, meaning the township, has stepped up wonderfully. So I thank you.
Commissioner Holmes.
Mr. President, thank you. Mr. Gentili, an issue had come up the other day you and I spoke about, and you gave me advice. It had to do with a cable across the street on Rosewood, and you said to me that the best thing for the township, for that resident to do, was to call 911 and inform the police that this line was there, since it was so hard to get through to Pico or to Verizon. That is probably advice worth giving right now over the public, or maybe putting up on our website again, to remind folks that if they're, just to say they're out of power is one thing, you should go to Pico. But if you actually see a line down, you don't know if it's live. Live wires do make a pretty good racket, but the wires that are involved in cable service and other service that's not nearly as strong as the voltage is still something that should be reported immediately, and the best way to report that is 911. So unless you say otherwise, Mr. Gentili, I would just suggest to everybody that that's how they handle that, because it's much easier for our police at least to check it out and make sure that it's not an emergency situation. An emergency situation did arise in the 6th Ward when a live wire had come down at the same time that something had created a minor gas leak in a part of the 6th Ward, and the response, neighbors reported to me later that how quick and professional and extraordinarily comforting the response was, and the township's ability to get those people into a safe place immediately while that situation was resolved. So I do have to thank, on behalf of the people of the 6th Ward, all the professionals involved in the township who helped deal with that situation. It certainly made a very scary situation much less frightening, and was handled very professionally and very efficiently. So bravo, Mr. Gentili, and to everybody associated with that. Thank you. And I will say that the number of constituents that I spoke to during this storm, overwhelmingly the feeling from everybody was how well our township responded to this. And I have to drive through several townships different times at work, and the difference is really stark and, frankly, for us, quite flattering. So thank you again, Mr. Gentili. And finally, on the subject of constituents, I just have to talk about one special one. I have 4 children, and when I describe them, people say, "Tell me about your children." I say, I have 3 boys, and then I have the Queen of Heaven and Earth. And at midnight tonight, the Queen of Heaven and Earth turns 13 years old. So
All right.
I'm not at all ready for that, and I'm not counting the 3.5 hours until then. But Annie, happy birthday from a very proud father. So that's all I have, Mr. President. Thank you.
Commissioner Allen?
Yeah, again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but part of what was going on, I know we all say Pico should have, the right amount of people out on the street, not have to go to other states. It happens everywhere, and the bottom line is, as Dan said, you can't prepare for the worst, and you can't have that many people on your staff year-round. It's just not feasible. Our rates would be through the roof. The fact of the matter is, if there's a storm in Florida, Pico goes down and helps them. If there's a storm in Virginia, we go down, Pico goes down and helps them. So I would expect the same thing. If there's a storm up here, you know, those places come in and help us. Again, I had people from Maryland in my area. I had Riggs Disler, which is a private contractor. I had all sorts of people. It's a fact of life. And I mean, to think that they should have that amount of people on staff at all time is kind of ridiculous, in all honesty. It's number one. Number two, there was another incident where it just showed how this storm really evolved. If you looked at the numbers, sometimes they'd go down, and then the next update, they went up, and then they'd go down again. This storm just continued to get worse as the time went on. I lost power twice. I got it back, went to bed knowing I had heat and was all happy, woke up the next morning and it was freezing cold again. So it just kept happening. You had an incident Thursday afternoon when it seemed like everything was done, which was also, I guess, in Commissioner Holmes's ward.